Thanks again, Eric, and I hope that everyone's having an enjoyable, informative, and productive meeting. I had registered and planned to be there, and I'm bitterly disappointed that I'm not, but I was in Toronto on Friday preparing to drive up, and I started feeling unwell, and I thought I could go up, I could stay in my room and see if I felt better, or I could go home and recover at home. And I think I made the right choice based on yesterday. So again, I'm very disappointed that I'm not here in person, um, or there in person to be a part of the meeting. But I'd like to thank the executive for allowing us to recognize the contributions of Al Dextrase to our forgotten fauna. And Al truly was a friend of our forgotten fauna. So I think it was perhaps not a coincidence that that was the theme, and we're able to talk about Al today. So I'll start off, and then Scott will follow, and Andrew will end up. And I think you'll see that we've intertwined our personal remembrances with the valuable science that Al had done. So I'm going to share my presentation now. Okay, so um, along the way in my presentation, I've added actually some either pictures of Al with fishes or fishes related to some of Al's different projects, and you can just test yourself, because I will name them eventually, but you can test yourself along the way. And if I was there in person, I'd give the winner one of our Freshwater Fishes of Ontario books. Of course, this is probably my favorite picture of Al. It was very early in our relationship, and I'm pretty sure we're on the Ausable River. And of course, Jason can correct me or Scott, because I'm probably wrong, but if I remember correctly, this was a greater red horse. Oops, wrong. Oh man. Okay, sorry. Here we go. Now, Al started his sort of graduate journey, his academic journey in Guelph, I guess, as an undergrad. And then he migrated northward, a trend that would continue a few years thereafter, first to Thunder Bay, where he did his master's on a nematode, a swim bladder nematode of salmonid fishes. And while he was doing his master's, he also worked with the MNRF, MNR at the time in Thunder Bay. And one of the species in his thesis, and I'm aware of this research because I used some of it to help me understand the refugial origins of lake trout, but I didn't realize that until I looked at it recently, that this species in the bottom left-hand corner was also in there. And if you guessed pygmy whitefish, you were correct. And from Thunder Bay, so you'll see that this is a theme for Al, working and doing his graduate research at the same time. He first worked at MNR and in Thunder Bay from 1985 to 1987. Then he moved north to Ignace from 1987 to 1990. And at that time, he and Helen actually published this paper. And it made me think about what my mother once said to me about having a career in fisheries. They're actually going to pay you to do research. As you can see, obviously they did a lot of ice fishing as part of this research, and what a wonderful way to spend time in Northern Ontario, I would think. And then I'll move further north to Sioux Lookout until 1993. And then you're going to have to look to the bottom right, because that's when they moved south to Peterborough. And for the next 15 years or so, Al was with MNRF, and the other acronym as well. He was an introductions biologist, then natural areas biologist, then species at risk biologist, and then senior policy advisor for biodiversity. Now, I guess, you know, I knew Al from his species at risk role, and Al was on the committee on the status of endangered wildlife in Canada from 1994 to 2009 as the Ontario representative at the main COSEWIC table, and he was a member of the freshwater fishes subcommittee from 2000 to 2007, and from 20 to 2023. We overlapped most of that time, and Al also co-authored the COSEWIC reports on Eastern Sand Darter, Greenside Darter, and Redside Dace. He was also first member, then chair of the Committee on the Status of Species at Risk in Ontario, Casero, and I'm guessing that I've given you too much of a hint on what this species is. And it's Greenside Darter, of course. And perhaps I should have asked you to name some of the people in these pictures. I'll just point out one in the top left. That's Dr. E.J. Crossman, of whom the Crossman Award is named after. Al was able to attend the freshwater fishes subcommittee meeting in Burlington in the summer of 2023. You can see him on the left going through the collection with Erling-Holm, his longtime friend and collaborator, and in the field with Andrew talking about this species, which is Andrew is doing some leading some pioneering work on. I did want to tell you this was 16 Mile Creek in Oakville, because it probably would have been a giveaway that this was silver shiner. And you know, Al has had a long history in species at risk. Before there was a Species at Risk Act, before there was an Endangered Species Act, you can see that Al was the lead on these national recovery strategies for species at risk in the Sydenham River using an ecosystem approach. So these are the very first freshwater ecosystem recovery strategies ever written in Canada, and Al was the main driver of those. And of course, speaking of main drivers, Al was one of the architects of the Ontario Endangered Species Act, and then he was also a co-instructor for the Class 1 electrofishing course from 1999 to 2018. So you need to think about, I'm not going to quiz you on the mussels, I'm going to quiz you on the fishes. You know, we have black striped top minnow and Eastern Sand Darter. Al moved over to senior policy advisor for MNR, and as part of that, he was key in developing the Ontario biodiversity strategy and the reporting frameworks, the first pollinator health action plan, wetland conservation strategy, and natural heritage system for Greater Golden Horseshoe. Well, I'm just going to step away from, you know, that's Al's CV, and that's, you know, and that's who we know Al to be. Talk a little bit about Al as I know him. And Al says we met in the mid-1990s at a conference, and I don't quite remember that. The first time I think remembering Al was actually was at Trent pickup hockey in Lakefield at 6 o'clock in the morning. I think it was a Wednesday in the mid-90s, and perhaps having a breakaway on him, of course, scoring. He was a good goalie, but on occasion I was able to beat him. I did attend Al's endangered fish workshop, so he had the first sort of workshop to really seriously think about what fish species are endangered in Ontario. I did attend that workshop, and I clearly remember that. And then I was on the subcommittee with him for almost the whole time that he was on it. And when I was at DFO, working on aquatic species at risk between 2001 and 2013, Al was often on the other side of the table on the provincial side. And he also was my PhD student between 2008 and 2013. More on that in just a second. I came across this picture. People have been putting together pictures of Al, which has been great and nostalgic and to a certain degree bittersweet. I came across this picture, and I clearly remember one specific element of this. Al and I picked up a fish, and we had no idea what it was. We're like, "What is this fish?" We're sort of getting excited. We're thinking maybe it's a new fish to Canada. What is this fish? I'll describe it to you, and then I think I'll share a picture before telling you what it is, and hopefully you can tell me what it is. The hint is it's in the Asable River. It was a silvery minnow, and it had a blotch at the base of the dorsal fin. Clearly remember it, and like we were stumped. And so this is what the fish is. So we saw this, and we're like, "What is it?" We thought, "Well, it sort of looks like I don't know, a fathead minnow, but what's that blotch?" Well, it's the first time we'd apparently had ever seen a redfin shiner. But I clearly remember that day and being stumped by that redfin shiner, both of us being stumped. Now, Al and I wrote this paper for biological invasions that looked at the impacts of alien invasive species on the freshwater fauna at risk in Canada. Al asked me to participate in this and did almost all the work. This became a pretty important paper in our field. It's been cited 350 times. Which is a pretty good citation rate. And it basically what we did is we took the COSEWIC reports for freshwater fishes and we summarized the habitats, summarized the threats, and then looked at the regional variation in threats, particularly as it relates to alien species was the term used in the COSEWIC reports at the time as of 2006. And I will point out that I've recently published a paper with a student that updates this analysis. So this was our first real sort of academic interaction. I guess it went well enough that in 2007, Al and I were fishing on a small lake up at my cabin, and not doing well, unfortunately. And Al was talking to me, and he said, "I'm thinking of going back to grad school to get my PhD." And I told him, "Piece of cake. It will be a piece of cake. You have the skill set to be successful. You're an excellent writer. You have published research. Not a problem. Piece of cake." Well, that term came back to haunt me because it came out of Al's lips many times when he said, "You said it was an effing piece of cake." It was going to be an effing piece of cake when I guess he thought it wasn't. But the discussion started off, yes, should I do a PhD? If I did, what would I do it on? And it ended with, "Nick, would you be interested in supervising me?" And I thought, well, if it's going to be a piece of cake for Al doing it, it'll be a piece of cake for me supervising it. I still feel it was a piece of cake of me supervising it because Al was an amazing grad student, despite the fact that he was still working full time and would have to take leave to do an ungodly amount of field work. Like I can't think of a person other than maybe Jason who's done as much field work as Al has, and this century in Southern Ontario. And he decided that he really wanted to work on this species. You saw it earlier, eastern sand darter, of course, or muck perch, or there are some other euphemisms for it as well. And so here's Al. I'm pretty sure, and Jason, I see he's online. He can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure this is part of some of his graduate research to go out and look for eastern sand darters with I see Steve Mars in there with Jason in the boat, and I think that's Jared Stackhouse on the bottom right-hand corner there. Well, Al clearly looks happy. He's in his element, collecting eastern sand darters. Here we go again. More photos with there's Scott Gibson supervising Al, who's supervising the seining. And thanks, Scott, for these pictures. Al was also part, because he was my grad student, he was also part of my lab. And we would go on just about annual retreats. And you can see that sometimes Erling would be on those retreats. I'm pretty sure this is at the St. Clair National Wildlife Area, where we're doing seining at night, either in the drainage ditches or the beaches. This may have been the beach, this may have been the drainage ditch. Here's Sean Staten, Al here, right in there, wanting to see what we found. This is us in Algonquin Park, and we were documenting the spread of this invasive species, which I'm sure most of you know is a rock bass. And in 2013, a mere 6 years later, and working full time through most of it, Al did have his cake and eat it too. He graduated with this thesis on modeling occupancy and abundance of eastern sand darter while accounting for imperfect detection. And he started something with this. Like, before Al really did the deep dive on occupancy modeling for freshwater fishes, we just didn't do that in Canada. And interestingly, at Al's defense, his external Jim McKenna, first thing Jim McKenna asked, well, I'll back it up a bit. Obviously, Al was arguing that when you model the occupancy of a species, when you're modeling the habitat of a species or trying to figure out what the habitat of a species, you have to account for the fact that you don't always catch the fish when it's there. So you have to incorporate imperfect detection in your analyses. Well, first thing his external said or asked Al was, I haven't been accounting for imperfect detection for my whole life. Does that mean my entire research career is a fraud? What a difficult question to ask a PhD candidate at their defense. Al was extremely diplomatic, and I would say answered it the question diplomatically, but in an academically rigorous way, and then sailed through the rest of the defense as you could say it was a piece of cake. And he published his main thesis. Then he was part of several other papers that used this approach. And I know my colleagues are going to be talking about this in more detail than I am, so I'm leaving it at that. Other than to say, Al started the imperfect detection renaissance in Canadian freshwater fishes, or as he might say, he made everyone drink the Kool-Aid, right? Because some people equate imperfect detection people with cults, right? But I'll let Andrew and Scott expand on that. So after Al finished his dissertation, he was the senior advisor for biodiversity in Ontario, but he also became an adjunct professor at University of Toronto Scarborough, where he co-taught a course on the ecology of and management of protected areas with Bill Crins. And he also was a guest lecturer in my applied conservation biology course, of course, talking about occupancy modeling and imperfect detection. Al liked to take pictures of fishes in the field. Actually, this is probably my favorite photo of his. I'm hoping that you guess what it is. Brook Silverside, another classic. Rosy face shiner. And we've seen this a couple of times before, but you know, we ichthyologists get stuck with the portrait so you can see all the characteristics and so on. But, you know, these pictures that I'll take are obviously artistic and give the fish's character. That's what I like so much about them. Here's Al. I don't know where this come from, but I thought it had cake and it had one of our forgotten freshwater fauna, so I had to include the picture. I wonder if anyone knows what that image is. It's northern mad tom, and I want to give you just a brief backstory to that actual drawing that was drawn by Joe Tomalleri, North America's foremost fish illustrator. That fish was actually caught by Erling and me with Linda Corkumscrew in the Detroit River, and I took it live to Joe Tomalleri at the Detroit AFS meeting, where he kept it live in his bathroom while he sketched it, because he always wanted to work from live specimens. So I thought there's a few nice stories in this one picture, and I really like it. And after his retirement, Al took on, well, I think fishing was his lifelong hobby. He added a species to his hobby list, and it was muskellunge. And I think I will end there. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.